The thing about kids, for some people, for me anyway, is that they complete your life, make some kind of sense out of it, even if they do drive you crazy sometimes. The pain is worth the gain. At least in our house it is. The telephone rang, and I figured it was Nana. "Hooray! You're home!" came a welcome voice. Well, surprise, surprise. It was Jamila, and that cheered me right up. I could picture her face, her smile, the bright shine in her eyes. "Hooray, it's you! I just got home to an empty house," I said. "Nana and the kids deserted me." "Could be worse, Alex. I'm at work. Caught a bad one on Friday. Irish tourist got killed in the Tenderloin district. So tell me, what was a 51-year-old priest from Dublin doing in one of the seediest parts of San Francisco at 2 in the morning? How did he get strangled with a pair of extra-large pantyhose? My job to find out." "Sounds like you're enjoying yourself anyway." I found myself smiling. Not at the murder, but at Jamila's enthusiasm for the job. Jamila was still laughing. "Well, I do enjoy a good mystery. How's your case going? Now that sucker is nasty. I've been thinking about it in my free moments. Somebody murdering army officers by framing them for crimes they didn't commit." I brought her up to speed, detective to detective. Then we talked about more pleasant subjects, like our time together in Arizona. Finally, she said she had to run, to get back to her case. I thought about Jam after I hung up the phone. She loved police work, and she said so. I did too, but the demons were getting to me. I grabbed another beer out of the fridge, then headed upstairs. I was still ruminating about Jamila. Nice thoughts. Nothing but blue skies. I opened the bedroom door, then just stood there, shaking my head back and forth. Sitting there on my bed were 2 large glass jars, pretty ones, maybe antiques. They were filled with what looked to be about 1,200 cat's eye marbles. I went over to the bed, took one out. I rolled the marble between my thumb and forefinger. I had to admit that it felt precious. The Saturdays I still had left. How did I plan to use them? Maybe that was the biggest mystery of all. Chapter 78. I had the feeling that I was being followed around Washington during the next few days. Watched. But I couldn't seem to catch them at it. Either they were very good, or I was completely losing it. On Monday, I was back at work. All that week, I put in my time at the precinct, on the job. I made sure I spent extra hours at home with the kids before I did overtime in my office in the attic. A colonel named Daniel Boudreau at the Pentagon was cooperating somewhat. He'd sent me Army records from the Vietnam War. Lots of paperwork that appeared not to have been looked at in years. He also suggested I contact the Vietnamese embassy. They had records, too. I read through the old files until I couldn't stay awake any longer, and my head was throbbing severely. I was searching for anything that might link Ellis Cooper, Reese Tate, Lawrence Houston, James Etra, Robert Bennett, or even Tran Van Lowe to the string of murders. I found no connection, nothing remotely promising. Was that possible? None of the men had ever served together in Asia. Late that night, I got another email from Foot Soldier. Jesus Christ. Obviously, he wasn't Owen Handler. So who was sending the messages? Kyle Craig? Was he still trying to play with my head? How could he get the messages out of a Supermax prison? Somebody was sending them, and I didn't like it. I also didn't trust the information I was getting. Was I being set up too?
Detective Cross, I am a little disappointed in your progress. You get on a good track, then you get off of it. Look back at where you've been already. The answers are all in the past. Isn't that always the way it works out?
The note was signed,
Foot Soldier.
But there was something else at the bottom of the page. A very disturbing icon, a straw doll, just like the ones we'd found. After work on Wednesday of that week, I visited the Vietnamese embassy on 20th Street in Northwest. The FBI had made a call for me. I arrived a little before 6 and went up to the 4th floor. I was met there by a translator named T. Wang. At her desk were 4 large boxes of old records kept by the government of her country. I sat in her small office, and T. Wang read passages to me. She didn't want to be doing this, I could tell. I suppose she'd been ordered to work late. On a wall behind her was a sign, Embassy of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. Also a portrait of Ho Chi Minh. "There's nothing here, Detective. Nothing new," she complained as she went through dusty files that were more than 30 years old. I told her to please stay with it. She would sigh loudly, adjust her odd black-rimmed glasses, and sullenly dig into another file. This pouty ritual went on for hours. I found her incredibly unpleasant. At about 9 o'clock, she looked up in surprise. "There's something here," she said. "Maybe this is what you're looking for." "Tell me. Don't edit, please. Tell me exactly what you're reading." "That's what I've been doing, Detective. According to these records, there were unauthorized attacks on small villages in the An Lao Valley. Civilians seem to have been killed. This happened half a dozen times. Somebody must have known about it. Maybe even your military assistance command." "Tell me everything that's in there," I repeated. "Please, don't leave anything out. Read from the text." The boredom and exasperation she had shown before were gone. Suddenly the translator was attentive, and she also seemed a little frightened. What she was reading now was disturbing her. "There are always unfortunate incidents during a war," she lectured me. "But this is a new pattern in the An Lao Valley. The killings seem to have been organized and methodical, almost like your serial killers here in America." "There are serial killers in Asia, too," I said. Ms. Wang bristled at my comment. "Let me see. There were formal complaints made to your government and the U.S. Army by officers in the ARVN. Did you know that? There are also repeated complaints from what was then called Saigon. This was a murder case, according to the ARVN. Murder, not war. The murder of innocent civilians, including children." She frowned and shook her head. "There's more about the precise pattern of the murders. Men, women, and children. Innocent villagers were killed. Often the bodies were painted." "Red, white, blue," I said. The painting was a calling card left by the killers. Ms. Wang looked up in alarm. "How did you know? Did you already know about these horrible murders? What is your role in all this?" "I'll tell you when we're finished. Don't stop now, please. This could be what I've been looking for." About 20 minutes later, Ms. Wang came upon something that I asked her to read a second time. "A team of Army Rangers was sent into the An Lao Valley. It's unclear, but it seems they were dispatched to the area to investigate the murders. I'm sorry, Detective. It's also unclear here whether they succeeded or not." "Do you have any names?" I asked. "Who was on this team?" I could feel the adrenaline ripping through my body now. Ms. Wang sighed and shook her head. Finally, she rose from her desk. "There are more boxes on the 5th floor. Come with me, Detective. You say that people are still being killed?" I nodded, then followed T. Wang upstairs. There was an entire wall of boxes, and I helped her carry several of them down to her office. The two of us worked late on Wednesday, then again on Thursday night, and we even got together during her lunch hour on Friday. She was hooked now, too. We learned that some of the rangers sent to the An Lao Valley were military assassins. Unfortunately, none of the paperwork had been organized according to dates. It had just been thrown into boxes and left to collect dust, never to be read by anyone again. About 2:15 on Friday, we opened another few boxes, crammed with papers pertaining to the investigation in the An Lao Valley. T. Wang looked up at me. "I have names for the assassins," she said, "and I think I have a code name for the operation. I believe it was called 3 Blind Mice." Part 4. Exit Wounds. Chapter 79. I had 3 names now. 3 men who had been dispatched to the An Lao Valley to stop the murder of civilians there. I needed to be extremely careful with the information, and it took Sampson and me another week to track the men down and find out as much as we could about them. The final confirmation that I needed came from Ron Burns at the FBI. He told me that the Bureau had been suspicious of these men for two other professional hits. One, a politician in Cincinnati. The second, a union leader's wife in Santa Barbara, California. The names were Thomas Starkey, Brownlee Harris, Warren Griffin, the three blind mice. That Friday, after work, Sampson and I went to Rocky Mount, North Carolina. We were chasing men who had played a part in mysterious violence in the Anlau Valley 30 years before. What in hell had really happened there? Why were people still dying now? Less than 5 miles outside the city limits of Rocky Mount, tracts of farmland and crossroad country groceries still dominated the landscape. Sampson and I drove out into the country, then back to town again, passing the Rocky Mount Wilson Airport and Nash General Hospital, as well as the offices of Heckler & Koch, where Starkey, Harris, and Griffin worked as the sales team for several military bases, including Fort Bragg. Sampson and I entered Heels, a local sports bar, at about 6 o'clock. Race car drivers as well as a few basketball players from the Charlotte Hornets frequented the place, so it was racially mixed. We were able to fit in with the crowd, which was noisy and active. At least a dozen TVs blared from raised platforms. The sports bar was less than a mile from Heckler & Koch, U.S., where some of these men and women worked. Other than the thriving high-tech business community, Heckler & Koch was one of the largest employers in town, just behind Abbott Laboratories and Consolidated Diesel. I wondered if the gun company might have some connection to the murders. Probably not, but maybe. I struck up a conversation with the plant supervisor from H&K at the bar. We talked about the plight of the Carolina Panthers, and then I worked in the subject of the gun manufacturer. He was positive about his company, which he referred to as like a family, and definitely one of the best places to work in North Carolina, which is a good state to work in. Then we talked about guns, the MP5 submachine gun in particular. He told me the MP5 was used by the Navy SEALs and elite SWAT teams, but it had also found its way into inner-city gangs. I already knew that about the MP5. I mentioned Starkey, Harris, and Griffin, casually. I'm surprised Tom and Brownie aren't here already. They usually stop in on a Friday. How do you know those boys? He asked, but didn't seem surprised that I did. We served together a long time ago, said Sampson, back in 69 and 70. The supervisor nodded. You Rangers too? He asked. No, just regular Army, said Sampson. Just foot soldiers. We talked to some other H&K employees, and they spoke positively about the company. The guys we talked to knew Starkey, Harris, and Griffin, and everybody knew they'd been Rangers. I got the impression that the three men were popular, and might even be local heroes. About 7:15, Sampson leaned in close and whispered in my ear. Front door. Look who just blew in, he said. 3 business suits. Don't much look like killers. I turned slowly and looked. No, they didn't look like killers. But that's what they are, I said to Sampson. Army assassins who look like the nicest guys in the bar, maybe in all of North Carolina. We watched the 3 of them for the rest of the night. Just watched the trio of hitmen. Chapter 80. Sampson and I were staying out at a Holiday Inn near the interstate. We were up the next morning by 6. We had a potentially heart-stopping but rather tasty breakfast at a nearby Denny's, omelets and home fries covered and smothered. Then we planned out our big day. We learned the night before that Heckler & Koch had a big family-style picnic that day. We were planning to crash it, cause a little trouble if we could. After breakfast, we took a spin past the houses of the 3 murder suspects. A slick group we liked called Maze was playing from the CD. Nice contrast to the folksiness of Rocky Mount. City meets country. The killers' houses were in upscale developments called Nob Hill, Falling River Walk, and Greystone. It looked as if a lot of young professionals with families lived there. The New South. Quiet, tasteful, civilized as hell. They know how to blend in, Sampson said as we drove by